Hello class, welcome back. Today we're going to continue with this idea of planes, except we're going to take it further and think about plane hatching. So as all of you have the handouts I gave you on the first day of the class, is what I'm going to have you do is pull those out to assignment number 4, and on it should say angular line continued, so definitely get those out now. With this idea of angular line, the first one is what we did is we're talking about the importance of drawing with straight lines and how every time our line makes a change of direction, it's a plane change. Today we're going to show how those planes change, but the value changes along with the plane change. So the way the rule goes, different plane, different value. And so usually when we're striking in values, we think that the top plane of a box would be a little lighter than the front, and then the side a little darker than that. So there'd be 3 distinct different values, 3 distinct different planes from the light. So anyways, if you pull out this handout, on the front cover is what you're going to see is all these boxes. So is what you're going to be doing first is you're going to be picking 3 of those boxes and you're going to be drawing them. You're going to start them with a 2H pencil, and you're going to lay them out, come up with a nice perspective box, and then the hatching lines in each one of these is done with a slightly different relationship than the prior. But is what I want you to notice about them, once you draw out your box, you can hatch in those lines the way that you're seeing them, but they're done according to the light. So if you really look at them, the top is a little different value than the side, is a little different from the front. So all 3 of the values are different. So when you do yours, be real careful, because when you're hatching in those lines, the closer they get together, the less white, the darker that area, the further apart they are, the whiter the area. So you got to control it when you do it. Anyways, you're going to draw 3 of those, any ones you want, and then do them with pencil first, then pick up a Sharpie, and then is what you're going to do is you're going to go over those lines with a Sharpie, making them nice and clean. If you then go to the next page, on that next page for you, I have 2 circled boxes. The second and the third one is circled. Those 2 circles mean those 2 you're going to do. The top one of the 2, if you notice, it's outlined strong. The second one below it is what's known as an implied line. We talked a little bit about implied line with the master copies and what that means. Implied line opens up the space from the box to the ground around it, unifies it more rather than isolating it more. So you're going to be drawing the second one and the third one. The second one you're going to draw with a hard pencil, and then you're going to go over with a Sharpie like the last 3. The one below it, you're going to do different. You're not going to use a pencil. You're going to start with the Sharpie, and you're just going to draw what you're seeing, put the implied line as you're seeing it, and then hatch in the top of the box just using the pen. Do not draw the box first with the pencil, then hatch in lines. All of it is done with the Sharpie. So with this one, we're putting together the other ones that we did. These 5 in total can be at the top of your 16 by 20 piece of paper. If you want your paper 16 by 20 to be turned this way, those 5 boxes at the top. Underneath those 5 is what you're going to do. If you go to, I don't know, it might be the 4th page. I don't remember exactly, but I'll show it to you so that you can find it. You're going to go to this one with all the boxes. Some of these boxes look like little Chinese box if you took a carry-out. Others look like match boxes and so forth. Is what I want you guys to do is not draw from the image. You're going to set up your own little box that you might have of something, and you're going to put a light on it. So put a light on it from a angle, set it up, and then you're going to draw it thinking about like what you're seeing here. So now these, when you see them, they're having to do with the light. So the areas in light are hardly touched, or you can use implied lines. The middle tones, the lines are tighter. The dark, the lines are tighter yet. So is what you're going to do. You will take that same piece of paper. If you got your 5 boxes on the top, then you're doing this one from life right underneath it on the same piece of paper. So then is what you're going to do now is you'll turn off the videotape, and you're going to do those things. When you're done doing those things, you're going to resume back, and I'm going to show you then how to do this from a figurine, which hopefully you have something like that at home, that you can then draw from, something that has a little more of a complicated surface than, say, a banana. So do that now, and we will resume in a moment. Anyways, welcome back. So the little figure I'm going to work with is this little African figure. And so is what we're going to look at it in a similar way that we did before. But this time I'm going to start it off kind of as a gesture sketch. The other way of working with angular lines is start off with your loose gesture. If you want, you can use the envelope. I might throw some envelope lines in there to get relationships. And then do that lightly with a light pencil, even though I'm going to do this with charcoal. If any of you do want to do it with charcoal on a slightly toned surface, feel free to do that. And start off, if you are doing it with pencil, start off with lighter lines first with your construction lines. Go to an HB pencil, start to put in straight lines, and then we can begin to go in there and hatch lines. So you will need, as we talked about on the first day, a measuring stick. This measuring stick will be important. We're going to have to measure guidelines. So what I'm going to do, like in starting off with most drawings, we're going to start off with a vertical line saying roughly how big this is going to be. And if you're doing something like I'm doing here, I'm going to take a head length and measure it. When I come down once, gets me to the breast line, twice, roughly, I don't know, there. 3 times, or let's do it again. So we've got once, second time to the breast line, 3 times, 4 times to the finger of her hand, the 5th times almost to the middle of the feet. So with that in mind, is what I have to do is measure this off. So I'm going to guess at a head length and just see what happens. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to come down. So we've got our first one, our second one, our third, our fourth, and now our 5th. So now I've got my 5. Ultimately, I know it's a little bit longer than this, as we just talked about. Now, sometimes to see this, I've got to get in the middle of it, like I'm glad I did just for this moment, because I got a very crooked line. So I do have to straighten it out a bit, so at times I'm going to be in your way, but we will work it out. So anyways, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. My 5th one got erased. These proportions are really important. So I'm just going to place them kind of boldly so you can see them. So I've got all the proportions in place. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So with that in mind, is what I'm going to do is think of loosely. I'm going to be doing this in a 2-point perspective, meaning, I know we haven't done anything with boxes yet, meaning her legs are going to be a little bit this way, the side of her is going to be this way, so it's going to be this sort of an angle. I'm not going to do her front and center, and if you do a little object, I would suggest that you turn it a little bit as well. So I'm going to start with it this way, and at the beginning is what I'm going to do, since my center line is representing this. I'm just going to draw a simple configuration of an idea, roughly, of where the head's going to be. So when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing a point for the chin, and it might be a little straighter than I have, but it's close, fuller this way, angling around. Okay, loose configuration. Now is what I'm going to do is just get a general sense for the body, like a gesture, and I'm going to come down. This is my box number 1, 2, 3, 4. So about here, here. On the 4th one, I'm going to widen it because she starts to get wider. Here, shoulders are going to start to angle a little bit to the right because I'm doing an angle like that. Okay, so I'm just going to strike in an angle. When I get down to here where her hips are, I see it widening out. And one way I can do that is to think of a curve shape like this. I'm going to get out of your way. So I'm thinking of a curve shape because underneath here, I can then think of the front of her body being this way, and the side, I'll get out of your way in a minute, being this way. So I'm going to think of those two angles. Out of this simple curve, I'm going to just guess at an angle of a leg, loosely. This one's closer to the body, so I'm going to kind of get a feel and a simple movement for this one, and I'm going to watch a guideline coming from here to the knee and then here down. So I think of a simple gesture is what we would have to do is angle, like from here to there. How would that go to an arm, roughly? Just guessing at the moment of where it might be. All the way down to the feel of the foot, and then the angle, roughly, of what the foot might be. And these are at an angle, so I've got to get a sense for this going this way, this going this way. So we're getting a loose sense for the placement of the figure. So when I look at this, is what we've got to look at when something's turned. We've got to always watch what we call this perspective center line. The perspective center line now for me is at an angle like this, as we talked about, like a box going this way to this way. So it's the head's doing this in a sense. So I'm trying to get a sense for these angles. So is what I have to do is find the plane break for the hairline. So if I look at it carefully, I'm going to bring it up about like this, and I'll strike that in. This head proceeds to go up. The center line of her face is going to be here. Okay. So once I put in that angle, 3 important angles to a corner of a box I'm going to look for. So this is my first one. The next one for the top of the head, I'm going to use that one going that way. So now we've got a feel of the top. So this is going to come down, and it comes down to her chin. The bottom of the chin wants to take on the same angle, like a box would. So we're going to do that. This edge of her jaw rides a lot along here, the back of the head. So I'm going to leave it like that at the moment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a sense now that I've got something of a head placed. I'm going to get a sense for this collar she's wearing. So the front's this way. The side is coming up to about here. And then there's a side plane this way. And my front is coming to here. So it's going to be in this sort of shape. So we're going to place that in. This line, I could find it, this line of the collar, and if it runs through her face about here, if I had it right, it's going to tell me it's got to be lower. Now this is the nice thing with angle lines. If you run them through something, this hits the forehead roughly here. Does that do the same? And if it does, you're definitely closer to what it ought to be. So now we've got that much of it placed. Her shoulders we got our center line designated down there. She's in perspective, so this side of her body is going to be narrower than this side of her body. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make 2 marks so you can see it. So what happens is, because I've got her turned, the perspective center line is here, and now I've got to watch the front of her body, which you can barely see it under the collar. It's got to go in this direction. So now I'm doing that, and I can peek and see underneath this collar the angle of her shoulder. So I'm going to put these lines in so you can see them. There's my boxy lines for the top of her body. So again, we're reducing it to planes. Here's our front, parallel, parallel, all the same. This is my side, okay. So what I'm going to do now is just generalize the front of this down, because it's going from a little wider to a little bit narrower. And then what will happen is when I look at her hand and her stomach, what's there, is what happens is my center line follows this direction, and then I put a ball in here because I can feel a line going over a ball like this for the center of her body. So follow me closely with this for a moment. So if I got a ball, it's a two-dimensional ball, but if I feel a line going over the ball, I can get a sense of the form of how does her stomach come out at me in this direction. I'm exaggerating it slightly, hopefully that it shows up. So the curve of the upper part of her body, I'm gonna bring it over the feel of the ball, and on this side it's gonna wrap like this. So you'll see it sitting on there in a minute. So this side of her body goes from wide at the top, narrow to wide. So I'm going to connect this point. It's going over the ball, and this becomes my side plane, which is going to become important for us in a little bit, and I'm going to run that down. So now it feels like if that's a ball there, that shape sits on top of the ball. So it gives it a structure to it. And that's, again, the nice thing with our angle lines. We can get that. Now this surface turns. It's no longer parallel. Parallel things, as you'll find out in our next class, parallel things are flat to the picture plane, and as what we've just done is we've put an angle to it like this, or not quite that steep, but we put in two angles, as you can see. So then it lends way for this. The collar comes down and over, and now I know that that arm is going to come out of that line. I can try to get a sense for its angle by using the stick, of course. So I can do that and say, oh, I can get a pretty good idea of it. It's going to go in this direction, and I know it's going to connect in there, and I can place in a directional line for roughly where the direction of that arm is going to go. Okay, so to give us a little bit of a sense of top and eventually side, because there's going to be a turn in that arm. The next thing that I think I'm going to play with is a little bit of the legs and get them in place. So this one closest to me is going this way. If I measure from one to the other, if they were straight, they'd be like this. This way, when I measure them across, this one closest to me is lower because of the angle. So I have to determine this. I've got 1, 2. These arms are coming down to about here. So I'm going to loosely place this one in, just as a loose measurement. This knee, I think, is well on its way. I'm going to make it a little thicker this way. So I'm going to put in one guy, my top line, and it's going to come up to about as high as that. Now I could measure it across where I'm at. I could just take a horizontal measurement, and in a way it's a little bit above her elbow. And then I could take that distance horizontally and measure it vertically, and then come down and say it's almost, if I've got it right, it's almost midway of the figure. So 1 plus this plus 1, and it's pretty close. That's middle of the figure. So we're pretty close to, I think, where it ought to go. So this angle is that angle, and now I'm going to, I'm leaving out my smaller lines. On her knee, there's a couple plane breaks here. I'm just generalizing it from the highest one to the lowest. There's a bend in there that I'm going to edit. Then I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to watch this angle. I think what I've got there is close. Again, so just going to generalize that in that sense. I am going to get rid of some of my guidelines because they will throw you off here. So we're going to do that. Now, this next leg, I've got to be careful because it's in perspective. There's a slight angle like this. So I'm going to strike in something, and then I'm going to measure it across horizontally and say it's that much lower than this leg. So I would do the same here and say maybe that looks pretty close. And then I'm going to watch what we call the negative space, the space between her body and her leg becomes important. So I'm going to take that angle and watch this, and then I'm going to check my angle coming up, and I get something like this. And I'm going to watch the space in between. I'm going to get a little break in it. I can't get it any higher than that. Otherwise, my perspective will be thrown off. I'm going to use a series of angle lines. I'm going to watch the bottom, and I'm going to see if I can join my pieces together like this. And this would meet a side plane about like that. So that one would go roughly there. And then this arm sticking out when I watch it, it's, oh gosh, maybe a little further out, not much. So I'm going to take that and do that with it, and then we'll bend it in. I'm going to check this line. I think I can angle it out just a little bit more. So again, keep checking the angles. There's another angle in here. I'm going to put this in. Normally I would wait on this, but I'm trying to get the right relationship to the leg, to the body. So I'm going to break it down a little bit more. And I'm going to go after the knee. I'm going to make this just a little fuller. Okay, now it's a little better. Okay, so we're going to leave that like that. The bend of the elbow, or I could figure out where the elbow is to her stomach. So when I look at it and we look at our placement, it's pretty close. The bend of the elbow, say, check my lines. This is going to just about parallel the leg, and it's going to come right into her lap like this. The other bend is going to move in like this and parallel along the edge of the leg like this. Okay. Now, if I have it right, her finger comes to an important landmark on the figure. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That fourth point that I measured hit pretty much her thumb. And so I want to make sure I'm in that placement. And I'm going to, again, so I'm going to get the hand just a little clearer just so that you can see it in here. Well, that hand is going to sit in there about there. And that should be in the right place, okay? So anyways, the hand's there. The height of our hip looks good. Thickness of the thigh, I can break it down with other lines now. I can say one angle. I know it's hard for you guys to see, but one angle coming up and then it bends. So now I've got to find out where is that bend, and it's about here. So now I'm just going to use long lines trying to get this angle different from that angle. And I'm going to try to clean this up a little bit on the inside so you can kind of see it. On the end of the leg, there's going to be one angle, two angles. Under the leg, to show the underside, I'm going to put a plane, meaning I'm going to watch the angle of the leg. There's an underplane that I'm seeing. So I'm going to place that underplane and use it as a guideline. I'm going to use it in relation to the hand. And so this line is going to come in like this. And ultimately, I'm going to hatch. This is early, but I'm going to hatch in some lines to show that this plane is curving the way the thigh goes. It curves that way so that it gives it a little sense of thickness. Our other arm, okay, so what I'm going to do is refine this just a touch now. So now we've got our basic big things in place of the figure. So now is what we're going to do is I've got the angle here on the breast line was our first measurement. So what I'm going to do is place in some angles there. So I'm going to alter these things a little bit. That was my first head length right there. And so I'm going to place in a series of angles. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Coming across to the other side would be like this. The form of the breast line in here would be here. I'm just going to leave it real simple because the hand's crossing in that position. The arm here, I can now locate it in its right position. It's going to come through and over, so it's a little lower. It comes out of the side of the body. So I'm going to reduce it to planes. I've got a top, side. Okay. that's ready now to put hatching lines in it, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. The other arm, we watch what's called negative space. That's this little light area in between. And I have to try to determine how big that is. That tells me how steep it is in perspective. So I'm going to place that in. I got to watch its angle at the same time. So you're thinking of all these things together. Elbow to elbow. Is it horizontally across? You know, believe it or not, it almost is. So these are, even in that position, this angle looks like it's going to work. So that'll do that to that. And then this arm is going to cross up under the chest. And this one will cross over. I'm going to thinning it up just a little bit. So this is in there, down, and say like this. So now we're going to get that to cross over. Now we're going to watch the turn of the hand. The turn of the hand is right about where I stopped my line. And as what we're seeing is a turn going this way and over to the shoulders. And then the hand makes this sort of bend. So I'm just going to keep it bold, dark lines. Hopefully it's legible on the tape. Still going to watch my center line because there's a plane break here. So I'm going to place that in. There's a plane break there, and this the turn of the body. Pretty soon I'm going to start hatching in our shapes. So what I'm going to do is come back up to the head, and I'm going to add the bigger planes to it and hatch them in. Because I think you're getting the idea of the gist of the whole pose, or the whole situation. This leg, it's a little out of whack, but I'm going to, I think, leave it just for, it should be down a little bit lower like this. Okay, it's probably a little better. Now, so what I'm going to do is break down the head. On a head, just like a box, there's these three lines. So now I have to determine what does their forehead do. And the forehead, check the angles. It's almost straight. It actually angles in a little bit. Where is the eye? So if I go and measure from the chin to the middle of the eye and measure up, it's dead center from about here. So I'm going to try to make a mark and figure that out. So I got it pretty much there. These angles, remember, they all got to be the same. This, if I broke it down subtly, it would come up and around. And there's my center line. So once I've got my center line, I could take this line and I can make the break in it the way your head goes. There's a curve in and a curve in like this. Meaning the forehead now curves this way, which means there's a plane break here. I'll get out of your way in a minute. There's a plane break right here because the forehead is curved. This angle is this way, and this is angling down this way. So just like the hatching you just put in the boxes, you're going to put in the structure of whatever it is you're drawing. So most of the times we think of this in three values. This is turning away, it's dark. The cheek comes out a little bit, so I'm going to pull it out. And I'm going to watch the cheekbone on this side. It's almost a parallel to that. It's doing this now. So now my cheek is changing directions from my guideline. This is going this way, it goes out. The cheekbone is out here, and then the face, the lower part of the face moves in. So at that cheekbone, where that makes that angle, we're going to draw another line coming across that way to show that the cheek is turning out. Up in reality, it's a little more graceful. I'm trying to keep this as bold as I can. This would hook up to the plane break here. This plane break, these would hit. Because wherever the plane breaks are, you're going to get your turns. So now you hook that up. Now these are some of our inside planes. This one's going to come across to her jaw. One, and then I notice it changes again. There's two angles. One angle, two angle. Very subtle, might be hard for you to see. This band on her head is coming across, and it makes a nice division here. So I'm going to place it, and then I'm going to make it just a little bit lower. And then the last, say, little detail before I hatch some lines is going to be the placement of this ear. And it's going to start here. It's going to come out, up, and over. So it's going to be in here like this. There would be a little plane on the top. I'll hatch in some lines. So the ear is going to sit there. And then our head going back. So I'm going to try to refine the plane just a little bit. Okay, so there we go with the simple plane of the head. Now is what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this side of her face is going to pick up more light. So what I'm going to do is erase out a little light so I can get some differences in values. This one in here, I'm going to darken it more by going this way, get it real dark, so you can see two different divisions. And now I'm going to take her cheek, and I'm going to angle it out by place the hatching lines at the angle of the planes. I'm going to keep it lighter. This one's angling in. I'm going to darken it so that we can see the steps of how they turn. This lower part of her face has a little value to it. Angle it to that direction. So what I'm trying to do in this is I'm going to lighten this so you can see it. So what I'm trying to do is keep these planes with slightly different values than the one next to it. So this a little darker than that, this a little darker than that, this a little lighter than that. So you can see the slight changes that we're trying to deal with. This collar comes out a little more like this. There's a plane break here, which means this is dark. This one turns this way, and there's a plane break here, which is a little lighter. The one in the center, I'm going to darken this one even more. Hopefully it reads on the tape. This one here, we're going to break it down into a couple. So this is going this way to this way, and then ultimately out. So the collar will do that. This one, we're going to use lines going in the direction of the plane this way. This one, I'm going to keep it lighter. And this one, probably do nothing to it. Keep it the lightest. Okay. Top part of the ear. So, what would happen is on this side of her head, there'd be a little value there. This side, not much curving in this direction. Okay. So then we get a sense for our forms. Now, the top part of her body. I'm going to go through the rest a little quick. The top part is going to pick up light here. It's going to pick up light in here. So what we'll do is we'll keep this a little lighter. The front of the body, we're going to take it and get it a little darker. Middle in the middle, lighter here. As the form here turns back, I think I'm just going to reduce it to 3 simple ones. This is at an angle. I'm trying to get out of your way here, so I got to get the right angle to the stroke. Same paralleling to the top. So this is going to go back this way. And it's going to continue down this way. So I'm going to darken it a little more by crossing over it so we get that strong dark. This is going to turn to more of a mid value. So I'm going to follow the angle. So one angle, this angle's turning. Different plane, different value, just like the boxes you just did. Keep these a little more spacious. And then, of course, the light side, we're going to keep it very light. I'm not going to use many in there. So we can kind of get a little bit of a sense of a curve and how the curve works. On her arm, this line, this division line of the plane breaks, in a lot of areas, the way the light will hit something, the high point, that edge in the middle is the lightest. But what I'm going to do is lighten this up a little bit, and then come back with your outer line, and then I'm going to break it down just a little. So, is what we'll get is a little bit of an inside line, and these on the outside of the arm are going up. They're curving this way, but I'm going to hatch them. So I'm going to try to get them rather close together. And it's what happens is they wrap around, and then they turn this way. The ones in here, not as dark. These, I'd have to darken them a little bit more. So you get the feel of the angle of this going up and this turning down. So just hatch them in, take your time. I'm trying to go through this kind of quickly, but anyways, I'm thinking of dark, light in the middle, and then a middle value there. Okay. This little plane would fall around the chest area, and then you would get turns of forms in here. It's going to be hard to see. Side of the hand would be hard to see, but there's a top to it. I'm going to lighten that up ever so slightly, and then show you very little bit. It's small, so it might not read well. I won't spend much time with it, but give you a little idea of it. So there's a thickness here, and this thickness that I'm seeing has a darkness to it, and it's going this way. And the top part is lighter, so I'm going to leave it like that. And then this itself would take on a curve like this. There'd be a top plane, and then there'd be a turn underneath it. Again, I'm working with bulky charcoal. It's a little more challenging in these small areas, but that's basically the idea. Because what I want to show you is this leg, because it's somewhat foreshortened. So what happens is there's a knee coming out at me, like this. So I've got to reduce this to planes. So I've got to say there's an angle here, which is going to create a top. To this leg, there's a point to the tibia bone there. So I'm going to find out where that is. It's in light of this shape, it's the lower part of it. So we keep in mind where those placements would be. So it's like that. So placing a plane, that's like placing the end of the knee. Then I'm going to draw this line to divide it. And then is what you're going to see, there's a plane here. So these angles are going to go now boldly in this way to show the top part of the leg. So I'm going to get them very dark. And then is what will happen is they're going to start to make a turn to this line like this. So I'm changing the direction. The plane break is here. Changing the direction, and the same on the inside here, coming around. So very dark, not as dark. Hits this point, and then they tuck under. They go this way. So now these are going under, and they're very, watch the angle, stroke it to the angle of the plane, darker here, and then turn it. So you begin to get the sense of the underside. So basically is what you're creating is kind of like a cylinder as it rolls around. And so this becomes my high point. That high point, I'm just watching it in light of the wrist because it turns, and then there's eventually things go on down here, like where the foot comes out, and then there's an angle going this way for the side of her body. So is what we're going to get is I'm going to show you just a little bit here. I'm not going to make this too dark, but I'm going to get the top part dark, and I'm going to keep the side part a little light, just so that you can distinguish maybe the arm from the leg. On the next leg, there's a lot of design things in this, as you can see, painted areas of suggesting at the dress. I'm more interested in the planes, so these planes are going this way to suggest the top of the thigh, going around, turning this way. I'm going to use a little bit of the eraser just to lighten up a little bit in here of this lower part of where the dress is, and a little bit of it in here. So this thigh turns in this position. Angle your lines in the position in which it turns. This is going to begin to move this way and around, so I'm going to make it not as dark, not as dark, not as dark. And it's going to come to a little top portion here I don't see much of the top, but I do see a little. And so these lines would have to say top. So they're going to go in a different direction. This value technically should be different than this value. If they're close together, one should be darker than the other to distinguish the planes. As I bring this down, I'm going to try to figure out where the foot is, somewhere about here. So I think I'm close, so I want to place that in. So this angle is going to go this way. We've almost got her solved. So this is going this way. There's a thickness to the foot. Put the thickness in, and there's a triangle that goes this way. So what I'm going to do is rub out what's in between. So the angle of the foot is doing this to this. The toes are going back this way. And then it starts wide and it gets narrow like this. And then what happens is I'm trying to make the side plane a touch thicker than what it is, just so that we can kind of see what's going on in there. But anyways, this becomes the side of the foot. So I'm just going to strike in those angles. There's the dress in here, crosses over in this fashion. So then we get this foot. I'm going to, now that I stand back a touch, I'm going to make it a touch narrower, not much. I'm going to leave it like that. And we're going to place in the last foot. I got to make sure this angle is close at least. The tip of this toe comes somewhere out to here. So what I've got to do is watch this angle. And then, so we're trying to watch where the toe sits in light of the head. So if I measure it up, it's somewhere about here. That's pretty close. And then the edge of the foot is going to pull back now, like this. And then the side of the foot just comes in like a little wedge shape, like that. There is a thickness to it. I'm going to put a little thickness, wide, a little wider on the top if possible. So this is coming down like the thickness of the foot. So that just sticks out from beneath the skirt she's wearing. So that does that. In this, there's some lines of the dress. Basically, that's our little sketch. There are other planes in here because of the way the sculpture is. I'm not going to break them all down, but they change at different directions. Okay. So that's your idea, plane breaks. You want to take your time with that particular drawing. I want to show you one last little drawing. And I'm going to use this little stuffed animal on the assignment. I don't think it's there, but it's called a model line drawing. The only difference is this, I'm using plane hatching. The lines are going in the direction of the planes. I am crossing over, where in the handout that you're going to be working from first doesn't do that. I'm going to let you do that on these things to get them darker. You can cross over. With model lines is what happens is we can wrap them. So what I'm going to do is something kind of, not going to spend a lot of time with it, just to kind of give you the idea. So like we talked about at the beginning of the class, axis lines are important. So if I watch from the tip of his nose to the back of his head, it looks like that. When I look at underneath his nose, now I'm going to combine gesture with angular lines. Because now that you know both techniques, you can use them. I use both techniques always. Underneath his nose, there's a plane, so I'm searching it out. And then I'm just going to put in a curve that I see. So this curve on the top, roughly where his nose is going to be, this comes around this way, reaches a high point, and this is wrapping back. Because what I want to do is get a little more accurate to the shape that I see. So it's going like this. So when I watch this, the nose comes up. I can measure the bottom of the nose horizontally. And when I do, I use those measurements. When I do, I get almost to the back of his neck here. And when I do, I can see how much is underneath. And so I can say that shape looks like it would work pretty good for what we're about to do. So there's the shape of his head. Now, with the shape of his head, like I was talking about boxy shapes, I see his nose, the top of it here. So I'm going to place an angle like I did there. So I got it set up the same angle to make it a little easier. That would go there. And I'm going to now think of this curve and where it would be, because now these lines, as I start to hatch them, model them, they're going to cross over this way. And his nose is going to be in here. You got to feel the nose curve around the form that is under or over, and it curves concave. And then underneath it curves convex. So remember our concave, convex. Easiest way to draw anything is reduce it to concave and convex lines. So anyways, this is doing this, and I can now do this a little more rapidly. I know the underside is here, and this is going to curve. This is going to come around, this is going to come around, and then this becomes an underplane. So these model lines that you do, they can become much more rapid as you set them up. I am going to watch some angles. They're going to tell me, those angles are going to tell me things are going to change. Directions are going to change. And so use the angles as much as you can. I can see that there would be a plane break here. So these are going to tuck under. Okay. The nose has got a plane to it. So there's a side, there's a front, and there's a side to it. Trying to get a sense of which way it would curve, I think like that. And then underneath. So you keep blocking it down to those planes. If you put in, like if you're doing a stuffed animal and you're putting an eye on it, watch how the eye sits on the surface. So watch the angles. It's not always round like you might think. So anyways, this curves back like this. So I'm getting a sense if I was to touch it, it would roll this way. So I'm going to wrap my line and develop it and curve it in as much as I can. Underneath here is going this way. Wrap it around, curve it. Now my line, I'm going to develop it according to form. This was according to light. Form, when you do it, it gets darker the further it goes back. Lighter, the closer it becomes to you. So I could, if I was doing this with charcoal like this, I could say this is closer, the closest point to me. I could go a little bit lighter and leave that in there and keep these darker because they go back. So what I'm going to do with a little bit more, I'll show you. I'm going to watch the back of his neck, and it's about here. And just because we're working with angled lines, maybe I'll continue. And I'm going to take a little bit of the front of his body like this. On his chest, there's a plane break right here. So I'm going to find out where that is. It cuts underneath this way. Underneath this way. Right outside his ear is where his body begins to turn. This begins to move this way. This takes on the movement of going this way. This is my closest point. So I'd have to begin to develop this, keep this lighter, keep this darker. And as I develop it, darker further away and lighter closer, you'll start to feel the center of that starting to come out. I know he's got an ear, but I'm going to leave it off. This is going this way. This is a plane break. So now we know that underneath this line has got to go this way. Follow the planes like what we did here, but this can be much looser, more rapid. In it, there would be a leg, but I think I'm not going to get much down just because I don't want it to carve into my other drawing there. So it might be out of proportion, but I'll show it to you a little bit. Feet are going to come out. Watch how they're going to pull in and overlap. Again, you can use curves if you want, but I'm structuring it where I can think of the tops of things, and this becomes my side, my front. How does it curve? So this is the thickness of the paw, plane break, different values should be in there, darker, lighter, top plane should come across at a top plane. This center wrapping around. Okay, so that's how these things would work themselves out. The other leg is coming across, coming through. Watch plane breaks. Watch how a foot might extend. Watch the thickness of the foot. Because right there where I've got a plane break, I know that that's going to, here's my stretch, here's my pinch. We talked all about that with gesture. So now you're bringing all these techniques together. Top, wrapping it around because it's going this angle. Top of the foot's going this way. The turn of this foot's going this way. This is further away, darker, irregardless if it is darker or not. This is further away, lighter, darker. Okay? So that's our sense for our planes and plane breaks. So find yourself a decent object, set it up, and take your time with this. The more you understand this, the more it's going to help you with feeling form on a piece of paper. And when we resume again, I believe we probably are going to be taking up perspective. Have fun drawing.